We're going to get into everything. So let's just get to our big story. It's the brackets. It's the Big Ten. It's 9 teams in the NCAA tournament field. A Big Ten tourney champ, Iowa, finished with a 5 seed. That 9 teams in all ties the Big Ten record set all the way back in 2021. Big Ten without a team on the 1 or 2 line. First time that's happened in 5 years. Wisconsin, Purdue got 3 seeds. Illinois is a 4, and then the Hawkeyes is a 5. So, Andy, what's your biggest takeaway as you look at this from a Big Ten point of view?
Well, first off, I feel good about our show because if people have been watching our show over the last couple of months, we've been pretty consistent that there was a great chance the Big Ten would get 9.
Yep.
Obviously, I was driving that Rutgers bus. Rutgers got in, barely.
Almost got sideswiped.
Yes.
How about they really needed to win?
Yes, those 2 games.
Yeah.
You were right, by the way, when I said, they got to win at least one of those 2. They needed to win both.
They needed to win both.
At Indiana.
Yep.
And then
the
home Penn State.
Yeah, Penn State. They certainly could not have afforded that loss.
And both of them were by a whisker.
And I also think, had they been the 5 seed and it, would have been in jeopardy there, had they lost another game to a team that wasn't an elite team, they would have been out.
And to that point, had Northwestern beaten Iowa, which clearly wasn't going to happen,
right,
or Nebraska, if they'd beaten Northwestern, that, if one of those 2 teams played Rutgers.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Yes. They could not have afforded a loss there. Yeah.
So, as the double bye, but it also mattered who they were going to play with the double bye.
Right.
So the fact that we got 2 teams in the first 4, I don't think, I still believe that Indiana probably would not have been in the first 4 if Davidson had beaten Richmond and the A-10 who only got 1 seed, 1 team, because as the AQ, Richmond cannot play in the first 4.
Yes.
So the first 4 is only for at-large teams. And I just don't think that, Indiana would have been there otherwise. But clearly Rutgers was going to be there because they were one of the last 2 teams.
Had the same issue with Virginia Tech, too, right?
Yes.
If you look at their overall seed, but they're an automatic qualifier, and so they couldn't play.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Overall record, Virginia Tech would have been in there, but that's not the way it works with that. To your point about not any teams on the 1 and 2, the Big Ten had chances to be there.
Right.
But it sort of cannibalized itself by, consistently beating each other at the top. I think there was a time where I firmly believe the Big Ten champ could have been a 1 seed over a second Big 12 or potentially, an SEC team. But, Purdue lost some of those games late. Wisconsin losing to Nebraska. Not that they would have climbed to the 1, but, potentially what if Wisconsin had won it outright and then won the Big Ten tournament title? I think it would have been hard to keep them off the 1 line if they'd done all that because they had such a great record. So there were moving parts. Overall, I think Iowa on Sunday, we talked about this off air, their seed, they're better than a 5.
They could have won by 50 and it wouldn't have mattered.
There's no question that the Big Ten tournament title game that feeds into the selection show probably is the least affected game for the bracket.
Yeah.
But Iowa's a 5 is incredibly dangerous. We'll get into it. But I think they are seeded to their record, not to their talent and their momentum.
I've never felt like there's a huge difference between being the 4 and the 5, right? Is it that much of an advantage to move up a seed line? However, I do find it it's frustrating to me. And I understand, look, that real estate is great real estate for the Big Ten to be the lead-in to the Selection Sunday show. I totally get why you want to be there. I just think it is frustrating that outside of it being a bid steal situation, that game is never going to impact the bracket. I just think it's become abundantly clear. And I get it from the selection committee's point of view because we know how all of this works. And so if you move a team around, then everyone else gets moved around too. You can do 2 alternate brackets is kind of the way around it. It's really hard, and those people put in a ton of time.
Yes.
We talked about this on the show yesterday, and I'm not one to criticize the committee, but I was better than that seed.
Yes, but I just glanced down at this thinking, okay, had they been the last 4, hypothetically, they would have been with Gonzaga. That's where Arkansas is as the last 4.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think there's a great advantage to being a 4. Yeah.
But I'm saying in this case, they have and I really believe they're in a better bracket or region
yes,
where they are as the 5. than they would have been as the last 4 with Gonzaga. So, we'll talk about it. I like their path, where they are versus if they had to go through potentially Gonzaga as that 4. So it worked out well for Iowa, even though they're better than a 5.
Agreed, 100%. So who do you believe has the most favorable path? Is it Wisconsin? I look at Wisconsin, I just say, playing Milwaukee, playing in Chicago, I don't think that region's that tough. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff working in Wisconsin's favor.
See, and I'm going to flip it. I think it's Iowa because what concerns me about Wisconsin is they're not playing well. So
right, okay, that's fair.
Yes, location matters, and they will have an advantage in Milwaukee and then Chicago. But that's assuming that they get by, potentially a dangerous Colgate, which can shoot the basketball.
Yeah.
And then maybe Iowa State, which also has been able to, Isaiah Brockington, former Penn State Nittany Lion, and Gabe Kauscher. I mean, they've got shooters.
Right.
And then if they play Auburn, I don't like that matchup for Wisconsin.
Why not?
Well, I think Auburn's guards, quick, really pressure you.
Yeah.
Jabari Smith, one of the best players in the country.
Right.
Okay, so who's going to jump out and play him? Is it Tyler Wall? Tyler Wall, if it's inside, but is he going to guard him on the perimeter? Because Jabari Smith can shoot face-up threes. So I'm not a fan of that matchup. Conversely, with Iowa,
right.
I think Iowa, is playing the best basketball, arguably, of, I think, any other team in the country outside of Arizona. Like, to me, Arizona and Iowa are playing the best in the country right now.
Wow.
I think it's unequivocal.
Yeah.
Okay? People can quibble with me, but I think those are the two, right now, two teams playing the best basketball.
Okay.
I think they're better than everyone in their region up until Kansas, and I think they can beat Kansas. Because I think they have Keegan Murray versus Ochai Agbaji, potential player of the year candidates, and Keegan Murray's, I think, better. And I think Iowa has more weapons, better shooters. I like the matchup for Iowa. And of course, it would be in Chicago.
I was just going to say, they'd have a good home court advantage. Although I'll tell you, having lived in Chicago all these years, Kansas has a ton of alums here.
Yes.
So Kansas would have a huge throng of fans in Chicago as well. But no, I agree with you. I mean, I don't, look, Auburn a lot better than I do. It just feels like they're not playing their best basketball right now. It feels like they have stumbled down the stretch.
True.
So, you kind of look through these 2 seeds. Obviously, Duke is the weakest of the 2 seeds.
Yes.
On paper, but they also may have 5 first-round picks. So,
by the way, are you discounting the Bruce Pearl coming back to Milwaukee UWM days as a...
Yeah, how about that? That's an interesting storyline, huh?
You don't think
led UW under the
there?
Sweet 16?
Yes.
But yes, I would agree with you. Like, I mean, look, I think Iowa's fabulous. We talked about going into the Big Ten tournament that they were playing better than anyone. I think the one thing that I worry about, although yesterday was kind of like the case in point and it wasn't an issue, is they're just not great inside. And so that is kind of the one thing that you worry about. They still got pounded on the boards.
But you know what was great yesterday?
Yeah.
Josh Agunale.
Yes, gave him some good minutes.
Good minutes.
Yeah.
And so hypothetically, if they can develop that, in a short amount of time, you throw him out against David McCormack if they end up playing Kansas in the Sweet 16 just to eat up some fouls and be physical with him. I think that helps them. And he gave them some quality minutes as just someone to bang Edey and Travion Williams.
Who do you think is the most challenging path?
Of the 9 teams, 2 teams.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Of the 9, the 2 teams that I have the least faith in, let me phrase it that way, are Michigan and Ohio State.
Okay.
For a couple of reasons. Michigan goes against Colorado State. They one of the best teams in the Mountain West. They've got a player named David Roddy.
Yeah, fantastic.
Who was recruited by
Minnesota and Northwestern.
Yes.
He turned down Minnesota and Northwestern to go to Colorado State. In-state kid from Colorado.
Yeah, so he's an outstanding player. They're playing really well. Michigan is not. If people are looking for upset picks, that's potentially one. So that's a danger zone for me. And then even if they get past that, they're playing one of the hotter teams in the country in Tennessee.
Yeah.
So I don't like that for Michigan. Ohio State, they're limping into this, and I just don't have confidence.
Play Loyola first.
Yeah. So I have the Ramblers.
Yeah.
I don't have faith in the Buckeyes right now based on their health.
I think that's the big challenge. And then what Loyola does so well is they defend.
Yes.
Drew Valentine's kind of picked up right where they left off, and they have a really good defensive team. They're a veteran team. Lucas Williamson, outstanding point guard. It was part of that Final Four team, is really good. But, yeah, that's a tough matchup. So they take away Ohio State's biggest strength, which is its offense, and then Buckeyes are banged up.
Yeah, I mean, as of last week, I did not get the impression from Chris Holtman that they were overly confident that Kyle Young is going to be able to play because of the concussion protocols. This is his second year in a row. So unfortunate and disappointing. Zed Key was available, but he wasn't used. So we'll see if more time helps him. And the Michi Johnson's been banged up. So they've literally not had one practice this year with the team that they really thought they were going to have at the beginning of the year, because I'm including Justice Suing and Seth Towns.
Yeah.
So
that's
they've
where
never
really
had their
rough.
roster.
Justice Suing is a really good player. And
Yes.
obviously Seth Towns was the Ivy Player of the Year, but we've never gotten to see him really at all in any kind of significant role in an Ohio State uniform, which is a terrible shame. A young man is from Columbus who came back home to play for the Buckeyes. But Justice Suing we did see last year. He was really good. And that's significant. And again, it's been all year, essentially. I mean, played a few games.
Right. I mean, look, Ohio State will have the two best players on the floor in E.J. Liddell and Malachi Branham. And that's two NBA players.
Right.
So they're going to have to play great. And if they do, yeah, they can beat Loyola. But they're going to need a lot of help.
Yeah. You were saying Michigan, as you said, Colorado State is a tough matchup. David Roddy and company. And then Tennessee, which is the team that I think everyone feels like, what in the world are they doing as a 3 seed, right? I mean, if there's one...
Well, it leads to the argument that game was Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, there's kind of the one... Yeah, but even still, I mean, if you were looking at this on Saturday and kind of looking at who should the 2 seeds be, I mean, the fact that Duke, I mean, people are putting their resumes head-to-head.
Right.
It's not even close.
No, because Duke's losses in the ACC were against teams... Well, first of all, Virginia didn't make it.
Right.
Miami was a 10 seed. These are home games they lost. Carolina obviously just got in. They were an 8.
And then obviously Virginia Tech.
Yeah, and Virginia Tech, which was not a tournament team until they beat them.
Right.
So they, their losses weren't great.
Yeah.
But obviously they're hanging their hat on, everything's spun, obviously. With Rutgers, we're not going to include November that much. With Duke, we're going to say, hey, they beat Gonzaga and Kentucky. Both games in November.
10 boasting 6 teams in the women's NCAA tourney bracket. 4 of them got top 4 seeds. Big Ten tourney champ Iowa is a 2, Indiana and Michigan both 3s, Maryland's a 4. So all 4 of those schools, with the way this works, get to host the first 2 rounds. Ohio State and Nebraska also in the field of 68. As promised, Megan McEwen is here. Megan, let's talk, first of all, just kind of big picture. How do you think the Big Ten was treated here?
I think 6 teams is great. I think it should have been 7, but 6 it is.
Yeah.
And for the first time since 2005, 4 Big Ten teams get to host in women's basketball. Top 4 seeds get to host the tournament, so that's really great for the schools.
Right.
Indiana is a 3 seed, and they have the opportunity to host for the first time ever, so that's going to be a fantastic atmosphere in Bloomington, especially based off what we saw at the Big Ten tournament when the Hoosiers made it to the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis. Overall, 6 teams is really solid, and you have 4 that are going to be, potential true in the running for a Sweet 16.
And of course, 4 Sweet 16 teams a year ago, which was a Big Ten record. And again, kind of if the seeds hold, you would end up with 4 again this year. So let's go team by team here. Look at the bracketing for each one of these teams, and you can give us a sense, because I think for a lot of people, maybe it's the first time that they've seen some of these programs and don't have a familiarity in terms of the opposition. So here's what Iowa's got. They take on Illinois State. Then you see Iowa State is the 3 in their region. So that's a team that beat them this year. And then you have South Carolina at the top of the bracket, and Aaliyah Boston is the 1 seed. That's a potential player of the year matchup, Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, but this is tough for Iowa.
This is a very intriguing region in general overall, but I think Iowa somewhat drew the short end of the stick regarding getting placed in this 2-seed position, because Illinois State's actually a really good Missouri Valley team, and they have an excellent player in Juju Redmond, who was snubbed for MVC Player of the Year. So she's playing with some vengeance. But then for Iowa to have to turn around and potentially play Iowa State in the Sweet 16, it's going to be a great matchup. And look, the committee loves drama, and we all love drama as a whole.
Right.
However, that's a game that Iowa lost earlier in the year, but to the Hawkeyes' defense, they are playing some of their best basketball right now. So it's also a matchup I could see them coming out and completely winning. But then in order to get to the Final Four, they have to face South Carolina, the overall number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. And what's intriguing about that matchup is the fact that Aaliyah Boston, the post player for South Carolina, is Caitlin Clark is a National Player of the Year candidate, as is Aaliyah Boston. So those two are really the kind of in the running to win it.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of arguments on Twitter in women's basketball about, are you going to go with the post player or the guard?
Right.
What do you really value in your Player of the Year candidate? So that could be a fun matchup down the road. But the Hawkeyes are one of the best when it comes to scoring. They're playing really good basketball right now. And Dave, you know better than anybody, if you can stay healthy and peak at the right time, you can make a deep run in March.
Well, they're peaking at the right time. I mean, that's been really cool. The Iowa women and the Iowa men.
Yeah, how about
peaking at
that?
the right time. Yes, they win the Good Timing Award. It'd be cool for Iowa, right? I mean, they haven't been to the Final Four since 1993. You're going to get 2 more shots at this with Caitlin Clark. I know next year everyone's coming back. Sonano's coming back. But this team's good enough, right?
Oh.
I mean, but it is a difficult draw, no
and
doubt.
It's going to be interesting to see how teams guard Caitlin Clark. I'm looking forward to seeing how teams approach scouting her that aren't in the Big Ten.
When she gets off the bus, perhaps?
I mean, you might as well start at the hotel. Wherever you can start, go there. Send a manager, somebody.
All right, let's get into Indiana. They are a 3 seed in the Bridgeport region. They start with Charlotte. If they win that, they get either Kentucky or Princeton. UConn is in their region as well. UConn is healthy. If you're not one who knows your mid-size Connecticut geography, Bridgeport's in Connecticut, okay? So that's challenging right there, because you would have to play UConn in Connecticut.
Yeah, it's good to be Gino Auriemma, isn't it? UConn, the committee takes care of you a lot of the time.
Yes.
That's a nice draw for them. However, that being said, the Hoosiers are another team that are playing their best basketball right now. Headed into the Big Ten tournament, they were struggling a little bit with some injuries, and Mackenzie Holmes had just started to come back. But Mackenzie Holmes played some of her best basketball in the Big Ten tournament, and this Hoosier team got hot. I think ultimately they ran out of steam having to play 4 games in 4 days, so you kind of saw that fatigue happen in the championship game. However, it's a team that has 5 veterans that already went to the Elite Eight a season ago, and that veteranship, I think, pays off a lot, especially when it comes to March, when you're having to prepare for teams on back-to-back days. You only get 1 day in between to prepare. So I'm really excited about this IU team, because first and foremost, it's going to be a fantastic atmosphere at Assembly Hall. But secondly, they have the potential to play Kentucky in the second round game. And that's a team that Indiana already faced earlier this year and actually won by 20. Mackenzie Holmes had 29 points in that game. Indiana out-rebounded the Wildcats by a +10 margin. So how is that rematch going to look like? That could be good. But also Princeton, by the way, a very good women's basketball team, one of the best defensive teams in the country. There's a lot of action that could happen between now and then.
All right, so this is not easy.
No, not easy.
Yes.
It's just not. Women's basketball this year is so good, and there's so much parity that no one has an easy path.
You know what's interesting? So back in a former life, I used to call some of these women's tournament games. I did play-by-play when I was at ESPN. And especially when you got those first rounds, the games were non-competitive. And I think the biggest change that I have seen in women's basketball, observing it from afar in recent years, is kind of what you're talking about. There's so many more upsets than there used to be. There's so much more parity. The depth is so much greater. Teams have caught up, right? I mean, back then it was Tennessee and UConn and everyone else.
Yeah.
And teams have caught up. And,
you were 100% right.
Yeah, so it kind of speaks to there is the chance, even within the Big Ten, we've seen this with upsets this year and with top seeds going down.
And the coaching's so good as well.
Absolutely.
Across the board.
Right, no doubt. Okay. Michigan is a 3 seed, so let's look at the Wolverines. They get American in round 1. Then they get either BYU or Villanova. Louisville is the number 1 seed in this bracket, and it seems like a consensus that Louisville's the weakest number 1. And then you see Baylor is the 2. And remember, Michigan beat Baylor earlier this year. Baylor knocked them out last year.
Yes.
So this seems manageable, right?
I think that Michigan has an excellent path to get to the Sweet 16, and I'm really excited to see what they're able to do. 1, they're going to be hosting again, which is always a fantastic opportunity for your team to host. But 2, when you see that Baylor matchup that could potentially happen in the Sweet 16, I'm excited about it because, one, I think this Michigan team is starting to get some time together back with Leah Brown, who's finally healthy again. She was out for a little bit in February, and that really hurt the Wolverines at the end of the Big Ten. But that being said, Naz Hillman gives you a chance. And the Wolverines actually beat Baylor with Naz Hillman on the bench in that overtime period because she fouled out. So it goes to show you that this Michigan team knows how to win with their backs against the wall. Again, they're going to have to take care of business first with that first round game, then the second round game to get out of their to the regional. However, I'm really confident that this Michigan team has enough juice with its veteranship between a player like Naz Hillman, Leah Brown, Emily Kaiser to still be able to make a run to at least a Sweet 16, if not an Elite Eight, because that Baylor rematch is going to be fun.
It'll be really good. I remember, of course, they made the Sweet 16 last year, which was the furthest that they have ever gotten. We'll see whether they can take it a step or two further this year. So the other Big Ten team that is playing at home, we've been through three of them. The other one is Maryland. They get Delaware in the opener, and then either Virginia Tech or Florida Gulf Coast win that, and you would potentially get the number 2 team in the nation in Stanford, a team they lost to back in November. They bowed out of the Big Ten tourney early. What does Maryland need to do to kind of get things going and maybe make a deep run here?
What's interesting about the women's Big Ten tournament is that you have a week break in between the Big Ten tournament and then the NCAA tournament.
Right.
So a team like Maryland, who is just getting point guard Ashley Owusu back, I think that week off is actually going to benefit them, and they've had some time to practice and get a little more on-floor chemistry before the NCAA tournament starts. This is still a team that's loaded with pros. I mean, Angel Reese is going to be a WNBA player. Diamond Miller could be on a WNBA roster as we speak. There's so many different players on that team that have the ability to get to the basket. They can shoot. But most importantly, Maryland's so athletic that a lot of teams are going to have a hard time guarding them in one-on-one situations. So as they get closer and closer to an Elite Eight or a Sweet 16 or a Final Four, rather, they're going to face obviously some tougher teams, but I think starting out, their athleticism is really going to help them regarding making somewhat of a deep run in March. And you just have to stay healthy. If they can keep Owusu healthy, they could be a really dangerous team.
And that, of course, has been an issue for them, as you said, this year. Have not been to an Elite Eight since 2015, so we'll see whether Maryland has a deep run in them. Ohio State is a 6 seed. They get the winner of the first 4 game between Missouri State and Florida State. Then it is either LSU or Jackson State, and likely, obviously, LSU, and that game would be in Baton Rouge. OSU is a team that likes to play fast. We've talked about that a lot this year. This is where, again, certainly, I don't know, like Missouri State, Florida State, LSU, could those teams kind of keep up with the Buckeyes' pace?
Well, I think first off that Florida State will more than likely win that game. I can't believe Missouri State got into the NCAA tournament when they had 4 conference losses in one of the weaker mid-major conferences with the Missouri Valley and women's basketball. That being said, Ohio State is one of the fastest-paced teams in the country.
Yeah. They
love to shoot threes between guards J.C. Sheldon and Taylor Mikesell, who shoot a combined 42% from beyond the arc on average. And teams have trouble playing against Ohio State when they try to keep up and run with them, because that is where the Buckeyes succeed. They press you the whole entire time. They turn people over at nearly 20 turnovers per game. That's what they're forcing. So if they can face a team that doesn't like to play that fast or will not be disciplined enough to slow down the pace of play of the game, Ohio State can make a run. But that LSU team is athletic, and they have some size. And where Ohio State has struggled this year is against teams with size. So it's going to be interesting to see if their athleticism can make up for it. But that LSU matchup is intriguing from the standpoint of Ohio State has to find a way to slow down the bigs inside.
I love watching Ohio State's guards.
Oh, aren't
really
they fun?
They are fun.
And they never get
watch.
tired.
They're a fun team. No, they're up-tempo, as you say, but we'll see whether that Achilles heel maybe bites them inside. Finally, let's go to Nebraska. They are in the tourney for the first time in 4 years. They get Gonzaga. If they win that, they'd have a date with the top seed Louisville. They're playing in Louisville. Megan is going to be calling these games, so by Friday, she will be able to give us a PhD dissertation on this area. Let's cut it to the headlines rather than the entire dissertation. Give us a sense here. Obviously, Louisville, again, the consensus seems to be the worst of the 1 seeds. Would you agree with that?
You know, I think that could be a good way to put it, but still this Louisville team is very dangerous. They beat Michigan in the Big Ten ACC Challenge earlier this season. And it's a team that has a lot of depth and has great guard play and post play. That being said, Nebraska is peaking at the right time, and they're healthy. 2 of my big factors when it comes to making deep tournament runs. And Nebraska played so well in the Big Ten tournament. They made a run to the semifinals, and I thought ultimately they clicked really well, and everybody was just on the same page chemistry-wise. A player like freshman post player Alexis Markowski, who is the Big Ten Freshman of the Year, is playing with a ton of confidence right now. Nebraska hit 15 three-pointers in their first game of the Big Ten tournament. So it's a team that can play inside and outside and shoot. What impresses me most about this Nebraska team and gives me confidence they could potentially upset Louisville is they are so disciplined. And Amy Williams is one of the best coaches in college basketball when it comes to scouting teams and having a scout-specific game plan going into each matchup. So as a result of her team being disciplined in that regard, they have the potential to play with some of these top-seeded teams and maybe get an upset.
Okay. Finally, Northwestern did not get in. I sensed when you were talking about Missouri State that the fact that they were chosen over Northwestern perhaps hit a little too close to home, literally and figuratively. Why do you think ultimately the Cats didn't get in?
Well, ultimately I think that there are a lot of factors at play. First and foremost, Northwestern, didn't have enough games that they were able to make up through COVID, which I think ultimately hurt them at the end of the day. They had to lose a game against Oregon in the non-conference due to COVID that they obviously could not make up, which hurt at the end of the day. It's still perplexing that the committee chose to put 4 Big East teams in, 2 Missouri Valley teams in. Just a couple of things didn't really make sense. Northwestern had 2 massive wins, one against Iowa on the road, who ultimately ended up being a 2 seed in this tournament, won the Big Ten tournament championship, and Northwestern also beat Michigan, and that was a top 5 team at the moment in time, not to mention a quad 1 win over South Dakota. But look, there were a lot of bubble teams that got the short end of the stick because, for example, in the A10, a team like Dayton, who's supposed to win the tournament and get that bid, doesn't win the tournament. They get an at-large bid, and UMass gets in. So little things like that ultimately really hurt some of those bubble teams. But I just don't understand how the committee can look at a conference as deep as the Big Ten, who has so much parity year in and year out, and only let 6 teams in. On the men's side, they let 9 teams in. The Big Ten has a lot more respect in that regard. I don't quite know why they can't get that respect on the women's side.
Well, again, good showing last year, getting 4 teams to the Sweet 16, and maybe as you start advancing more and more teams at the top of the bracket, perhaps that happens. It's a shame. Veronica Burton is fun a player.
She's and look, Nia Clouden from Michigan State is also a draft pick, and Veronica Burton's going to be a first-round draft pick. So you're leaving 2 potential WNBA players out of the tournament, which is a shame.
It's a shame. Megan, great stuff. Really appreciate you coming in and have great calls this week.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
Louisville.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
Should be fun.
Yes, should be indeed. Megan McKee. All right, Andy's back with me. We're going to dive into these bracket matchups. Let's start with Wisconsin. They get the gate, out of the gates, the 14 seed. Again, they're playing in Milwaukee. They get LSU's team turmoil, perhaps, or Iowa State. And then after that, Auburn. We talked a little bit about how the Tigers have stumbled a bit down the stretch, but Andy's saying, maybe a potentially difficult matchup for Wisconsin personnel-wise. And then Kansas is the 1 seed. You've got Milwaukee, then Chicago. For Wisconsin, I think the committee took care of them pretty well, but break all this down for us. What do you see with the Badgers?
Well, first off, they earned it. They got a share of the Big Ten regular season title. We've talked all year about their non-conference, road neutral, winning the relocated Maui Invitational by beating, at the time, a potential, SEC finalist in A&M.
Right.
A Houston team that won the American, and a St. Mary's team that made the tournament. So they didn't have any bad losses. Even their loss to Providence, they won the Big East. I mean, the schedule played out, and some of these games were out of their control. And I will say this about Wisconsin, and I'll say this till I'm blue in the face as we go into next year and the years ahead. Some of the most important games on your schedule are the first game in a tournament in the non-conference. Because if they don't beat A&M, which they had to come back from a double-digit deficit.
Comeback,
they don't play Houston.
Right.
And in that game, Houston was fully healthy. They go up by 20. They hold them off. Johnny Davis has 30. He has said that was the game that sort of changed things for them. So the whole season really changed.
And then beat St. Mary's after that. Yeah.
But I'm saying
which
that
they would have not had the opportunity, to your point. Yep.
And that A&M game changed, in hindsight, everything, by coming out, by what happened. So... but they have to get healthy. Johnny Davis did not play well, as we know. We were there watching it. He clearly played a full game, but he didn't have that spring to his step.
Didn't seem like it.
No. So this Colgate game, I think, is a good matchup for them because they're not going to run. This is going to be very much a game in Wisconsin's wheelhouse. And I know this is not the traditional back to the Bennett era, Badgers, but there's no question that this team can shoot the basketball. So they're going to have to defend the three against Colgate. And then if they do get past that game, LSU, I have no faith in. Will Wade's out. Kevin Nickelberry's the interim coach. LSU's been sort of erratic anyway. I like Iowa State in this situation, but they've got shooters. So this little mini tournament for Wisconsin's, I think, going to come down to their perimeter three-point defense.
Right, you make the point on Colgate. I mean, this is, they shoot 40% from three. They're playing with a ton of confidence. They haven't lost a game since January.
Right.
Won 15 in a row. So this is one of those games I think a lot of people will point to and say if there could be one massive upset. I just don't see it happening to Wisconsin in Milwaukee.
That
feels like that.
You earn that right.
Yeah, which they did. They had 9 quad one wins. There are
Yes.
only 4 teams in the country that have more. They deserve that.
So this will be a road game for any of those teams that go against Wisconsin. So
absolutely.
Location matters, and that's why I have faith in the Badgers.
Let's move on to Purdue and take a look at their portion of the bracket. And there you see it again, a game with the Ivy League champs in Yale. They finished second in the regular season, but won the tournament. Then you get Texas. Chris Beard, we know how well his team defends, or perhaps Virginia Tech, which surprisingly won the ACC. You've got Kentucky in that little sub-bracket as well. And, of course, Baylor is the 1 seed. What do you see in terms of Purdue's road?
I like it. In fact, ultimately, I have Purdue getting out of this. I'm going to have more faith in the Boilermakers because the only thing they did wrong, to me, yesterday was turn the ball over. Now, that's a lot, but that was the big, massive, red flag that they committed. If they don't turn the basketball over, I think they win on Sunday, at the clip that they did. Because Jaden Ivey had a couple of those plays where he just took over. By the way, weird slippage was going on at the other end of the court.
That's pretty scary. I mean, I'm worried a little bit about Jaden Ivey. He's hit his tailbone twice.
Yes.
And just to turn out, he still had the explosion, it looked like, after that. But, yeah, that was strange.
So maybe this will help. They don't play till Friday to give him an extra day. But, yeah, I thought overall they played well except for turning the ball over. And if they can control that. Now, the good news for Purdue is I don't think that Yale will pressure them. So I don't think that'll be an issue. And then, in the next game, if they do get that, I don't see Virginia Tech being able to do it. Could Texas? They could. Could that be a problem? But I don't think Texas has the bigs to control. So I like Purdue getting out of that group. And if they do that, then, they end up in Philadelphia, potentially against Kentucky. Although I wouldn't cement them because Murray State is really good.
Yeah.
Like that feels like a potential trouble spot.
Right.
Excuse me. For
Good
Kentucky.
for the committee keeping Murray State out of an 8-9.
Yes, excuse me. Yes, no question about it.
Okay, so that's Purdue's story. Let's move on to Illinois. Illinois ended up with a 4 seed. They get Chattanooga in the first game, and then potentially Kelvin Sampson in Houston, as you said, a team that's been very banged up. But, man, Sampson, to his credit, has done a really good job, although they have 0 quad one wins. And then Arizona, we already know Arizona and Illinois have played this year, with Arizona winning in Champaign, a team that certainly has the size to deal with Kofi Coburn. What do you think about where the Illini are? And of course, the big disappointment for Illinois fans is the fact they don't get to play in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major disappointment, but unfortunately, you could say they earned it by not playing well down the stretch.
Yes.
They earned a ticket somewhere else.
You reap what you sow.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's their fault. But this is, Chattanooga beat Furman in overtime. Unbelievable game. Shot of the probably champ week by David Jean-Baptiste in overtime. But it's a good team coached by Lamont Paris.
Yes, former Badger assistant.
Former Badger assistant. But I just don't think they have the inside power to deal with Kofi, Coleman Hawkins, Omar Payne. They have the guard play. A lot of these schools like that do have the quick guards.
Right.
And that could be an issue. The big thing for Illinois is, do they get Jacob Grandison back? He was out with the shoulder injury. Certainly hurt, as Raphael Davis, our colleague, was talking about their spacing ability to, make threes. That hurt them. Hopefully he will be back for that. But I like them in that matchup. And while Houston, UAB is going to be a good game, I think Houston advances to play Illinois. And Houston, has been riddled with injuries, but what hasn't changed is their ability to defend. And so this is going to be a bit of a rock fight if it's Houston, Illinois. Illinois has more talent because Houston is not healthy, lost Marcus Sasser earlier in the year. He was their best player, potential all-league MVP in the American. So they should win this game if they don't turn the ball over. But as we know with Illinois, with Curbelo, that is a problem. You asked me earlier at the beginning of the show who has a difficult path. Illinois has the talent to get to the Final Four, but it's not good that they potentially could meet Arizona. I just do not see them beating this Arizona team. Arizona, as we saw earlier in the year, is a bad matchup for them. They've got three bigs inside with, Koloko and Tubelis and Mathurin that can handle Illinois. Kofi was frustrated in that game. And Arizona can get up and down. They can run. I just think it's a bad matchup for the Illini if they get to the Sweet 16.
Arizona feels to me like the team that is playing the best heading into this tournament. Now, that doesn't always translate.
Yes.
I think we often kind of fall into that trap of teams that play well down the stretch, and it doesn't. Again, there's no hard and fast rules in the NCAA tournament. But
the one thing I'll just say, and I know we're here at the Big Ten, but I would just say that overall, the argument that wasn't made on Sunday that I thought could have been made is Arizona Gonzaga.
Number one overall seed.
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually kind of thought you could make a stronger argument for Arizona to be the number one overall. But I digress.
Right. What about the job Tommy Lloyd?
Unbelievable.
Incredible.
Gonzaga assistant.
Yeah. Okay, finally, we've talked a little bit about Iowa, so let's just kind of briefly dive into the Hawkeyes. We both feel like they probably deserved a 4, but you look at this, the little sub-bracket they've got here. I mean, Richmond played its way in. Providence has been a team that's just won a million close games with a ton of transfers. South Dakota State's a really good three-point shooting team. Maybe a lot of people kind of fashionably picking South Dakota State to beat Providence. You've got Kansas as the 1 seed there. If that were to happen again, that game would be in Chicago. I would have a ton of fans. How do you feel about the Hawks?
I love it. I actually have Iowa getting the whole way to the Final Four. And I'm riding that, not a bus, but maybe an Iowa train here from Iowa City. Because
Purdue has the train.
Yeah, but it's all about matchups. And while Richmond is on a little bit of a hot streak, obviously, where they won the A-10 on Sunday over Davidson, Jacob Gilyard is the all-time NCAA steals leader. They are a team that won't turn the ball over.
Princeton offense.
Yes, and we saw Fran McCaffrey talk about them yesterday. He's very familiar with them, led by Chris Mooney, who's a former Princeton player. So they're not going to turn the ball over, but I just don't see them having a good matchup for Keegan Murray. That's sort of where they're weak.
Okay.
So I think that will be the advantage for Iowa in that one. And then I don't have a lot of faith in the Friars. They got run by Creighton. It kind of feels like, they won the Big East, and all the credit to them that they did it, but was on an unbalanced schedule. They didn't go to Creighton. They didn't go to Seton Hall. They didn't play UConn a second time because of COVID. They didn't make up those 3 games. They lost to Villanova twice. They got run by Creighton. Things are not trending in the right way for them heading into a dangerous game against South Dakota State team that's won 21 in a row. And winning breeds confidence, obviously. So we'll see if they even get out of that. And I just think Iowa's better than those teams. And as I said earlier in the show, I like the way Iowa matches up against Kansas. To your point, my cousin went to KU. She's from suburban Chicago. So I know KU is a very popular school in the suburbs here for sure. There's a lot of alums, but not as many as Iowa.
No doubt.
But I think an Iowa-Kansas game on Friday night at the United Center would be awesome.
It would be amazing, yes. Seemingly a third of my high school that I went to in suburban Chicago went to Kansas. So yes, there are a lot of Kansas fans in Chicago, but there are also a heck of a lot of Iowa fans. That would be. Back on Big Ten today as we continue to go through the brackets. Michigan State and Davidson, the Foster Lawyer game. The Michigan State transfer now plays for Davidson. If Michigan State were to get past that game, they almost certainly would take on Coach K and Duke. So you'd have Izzo against Coach K. Izzo trying to end Krzyzewski's career, although Krzyzewski's had the better side of the matchups with Izzo, though Michigan State's won 2 of the last 3. But Davidson is not going to be an easy team to play against. I mean, you talk about well-respected coaches. Bob McKillop, one of the most well-respected mid-major coaches in the country, runs such great offense.
Yeah, there's nothing mid-major about Bob Davidson. Bob McKillop, excuse me. who coaches Davidson, he's had
been a long few days.
Yes, he's had plenty of chances to go all over the country.
Right.
He's stayed put. Think about the 3 of the 4 coaches there. Nothing against Fullerton, but you've got 2 Hall of Famers, and I think McKillop easily could be a Hall of Famer. Certainly a college basketball Hall of Famer.
Yes.
For what he's accomplished down there. Incredibly well respected. This is going to be a very difficult game for Michigan State, and to me, the fact that it is a Friday, if I'm correct, is that correct? Yeah, I think it's a Friday. It is a Friday.
Yes.
I think is huge for Michigan State because Tyson Walker is a critical piece for the Spartans. They're going to need Tyson Walker because he's been a big shot maker and free throw shot maker lately for Michigan State. Now, the big plus for the Spartans, where I think they have an advantage against Davidson, is the play of Marcus Bingham in the last week. He's been grabbing everything that's in the air and finishing it, and has played with a lot of confidence. And, he's had a back-and-forth relationship there with Izzo and the staff. So I think that's key. If they get to Duke, you say about the record, to me, the biggest win ever for Izzo against K was in 2019, the Elite Eight. I was there in D.C., and Cassius Winston to get to the Final Four to knock off the Zion Williamson, R.J. Barrett team. And if he does it again to end his career, that would be 1A.
Yes, I would agree. Yes, the last one would be 1A. This would be 1, is what you're saying. Yes, I agree.
I don't know.
Well, even though you wouldn't have a Final Four at stake.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go. 19 was 1A because the Zion Williamson team was projected to win the whole thing.
Fair point. Yes. Right. Yeah, maybe I'm a prisoner of the moment. Just the notion that it would be Krzyzewski's last game. But yeah, you're probably right. That was an unbelievable Duke team. Okay, let's move along here and check out our next bracket. That is Ohio State, and we mentioned the challenging matchup against Loyola. I need Villanova. We know their recent success in the NCAA tournament. Colin Gillespie seemingly in his 9th year there. Michigan, of course, is at the top of that bracket. What do you think about the Buckeyes?
I don't like it. It is filled with obstacles here because, A, as we said at the top, we don't know Kyle Young's status, concussion protocols. Zed Key has been out with an ankle injury. Either one played in the Big Ten tournament. The Ramblers won the Missouri Valley Conference title. They lost the regular season on the last day against Northern Iowa. This is a very experienced team, guys that were at the Final Four team, a couple players led by Lucas Williamson. So this team definitely more than capable of winning this game. I don't like it. And then if they do win it, you got a Villanova team that's playing its best basketball this season. They just won the Big East tournament led by Colin Gillespie, who's playing at his best ever, and he was the MVP. So don't like this. And I mentioned earlier in Michigan, Colorado State's a difficult matchup for them. And then Tennessee, Kennedy Chandler is the better guard than anyone that Michigan would have. So I don't see either Michigan or Ohio State getting to the Sweet 16.
2 Big Ten teams in the first 4. Indiana will take on Wyoming. Were they to win that game, they get St. Mary's and then UCLA or Akron to follow. What do you think of the Hoosiers?
I like it a lot. I heard there was a little complaining on the seeding and the placement, but I really like Indiana's chances here. Wyoming has faltered down the stretch.
They're better at altitude. There's no altitude.
7,000 feet in the AA in Laramie. Once spent a full week in Laramie at the WAC tournament. Anyway, I digress. Graham Ike, big man who's going to go against Trace Jackson Davis. They have another player, Hector Maldonado, who's really good. But away from home, not the same team. I think they win that game. And I think, even though Mateus Tau for St. Mary's, he's got size, and Tommy Kusi's been there as long as Jordan Bohannon's been at Iowa, at St. Mary's. I just like Indiana's chances to win both games.
Wow.
To get to UCLA.
Remember, every year but one, we have had a team that won in the first 4 then win another game. And, of course, we've had 2 teams make the Final Four.
Yeah, VCU and UCLA.
UCLA last year.
So I like Indiana's chances. They got good momentum. They're defending. Xavier Johnson's playing his best.
Right.
TJD flipped that switch in the Michigan half. So I like Indiana to see me in Portland where I will be and then advance.
If they play St. Mary's, no one may score in that game. There's two really good defensive teams going head-to-head there. We do not want to give Rutgers the short shrift, although we have certainly not given them the short shrift on this show this year. We have spent a lot of time talking about Rutgers. They get Notre Dame. I think the one team that the consensus is, how in the world did they make it in? They have the one win over Kentucky and really nothing else on their resume. And then if you win that, you get Alabama. What do you think of Rutgers?
Again, I really like the chances of these two teams in the first four. Notre Dame's not playing well. Blake Wesley's their best player, but he can be defended. I think Rutgers wins that game, certainly defensively. And then against Alabama, which has been all over the map, I think defensively, Rutgers can guard Alabama, beat them, and then if they play Texas Tech, you talk about a rock fight.
Yeah.
Because both teams really defend. I mean, that has the total makings of a 46-44 game between Rutgers and Texas Tech. So I actually like their bracket.
I was thinking about the potential between a Rutgers and Alabama game as being the two weirdest resumes in the NCAA tournament, right? Because, the inexplicable losses for Alabama, they lost to Georgia and lost to Missouri, and then they have some unbelievable wins. Beat Gonzaga. They beat, there's a Baylor, right?
Yes.
Did they beat Baylor? Yeah, I mean, just crazy.